You're listening to a podcast by the Center for Action and Contemplation. To learn more, visit cac.org.
Greetings. I'm Jim Finley.
And I'm Kirsten Oates.
Welcome to Turning to the Mystics. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our time together turning for trustworthy guidance to one of the great classic works in the Christian mystical tradition, The Way of a Pilgrim. In the previous session, Kirsten and I kind of laid the groundwork for the background of this work. So indicating now, as I said there, that I'm going to kind of walk paragraph by paragraph through the first chapter. And I'll be sharing with you what it evokes in me. So hopefully as you listen, you can see what it might evoke in you as a source of your own guidance in your search for God. The Pilgrim begins. By the grace of God, I am a Christian man. By my actions, a great sinner. And by calling a homeless wanderer of the humblest birth who roams from place to place. My worldly goods are a knapsack with some dried bread in it on my back, and in my breast pocket a Bible, and that is all. So in the very beginning, the Pilgrim sets a tone for the whole story, and really is going to say ultimately the tone for our story, the ultimate dimensions of our story. In this great truth that God is love, and when love touches suffering, the suffering turns the love into mercy. And so the Pilgrim's solace, the Pilgrim's peace of mind is in the mercy of God. For him is infinitely precious as the beloved in the midst of his wayward ways and his brokenness, which is the essence of the gospel, the good news, sets the tone for it. And he says he's a wanderer of the humblest birth. And here I would say we're looking for the ways in which it's obviously in the literal sense, our life's very different than the Pilgrim's life. And for example, I'm not a wanderer. I'm sitting here in my home. I've been living here for 30 years. And chances are, too, you're living in your home, apartment, wherever you live. But we're all a wanderer in a different sense, in an interior sense. That is, St. Augustine, you made our hearts for thee, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. And so we're on this pilgrimage, finding our way to this homeland of learning to rest in God, who's unexplainably already resting in us. God's resting in us as the beloved. And we, with God's grace, are seeking to be healed from all that hinders us from resting in God, who's resting in us. And this is the pilgrimage that we're on, this kind of this winding path toward this realization. And also, as we're going to see here too, is that this homeland is not just the ultimacy of it, just isn't something that's actualized in its fullness in death when we cross over into glory. But it can be intimately and mysteriously realized here, in via, homo viator, while we're still on the way, we can realize the homecoming that we're searching for is already taking place. And this is what the whole story is about, really, this way. There's a book I like very much on Buddhism by Baum, B-H-M, on the middle way. And he says the thing about Buddhism is the teachings of the Buddha is a heightened sense of ambivalence between means and ends. And the same is true of the gospel. That the path that leads toward the fulfillment, this infinite union with the infinite presence of God, starts welling up beneath our feet on the path in which we're searching for it. So there's this kind of realized eschatology, this realization of what we're searching for is already here, or it's already found us, and it's drawing us towards itself. And so the author of the Way of a Pilgrim sets this whole tone of interiority of our life and how God is present in our life and guiding us. And we would say here too, then, as we listen to these teachings, and with all these mystics, it's the light that shines out from the teaching is illuminating our own path, and the sincerity which even draws us to be touched by the beauty of these teachings, which bears witness to that we're already on this path of which the Pilgrim speaks this way. When he says that his worldly goods are a knapsack with some dried bread in it on his back, and in my breast pocket a Bible, and that is all, is the dried crust of bread, again, it's very different for us. My worldly goods, because I'm sitting here, my worldly goods aren't reduced to some dry bread in it, because I'm looking at my furniture in the living room. I have a lot of clothes in my closet, you too probably, and you try to be sensitive to those who have less and all of that. But here's the whole point, the deeper level, is that the dried bread in it on his back sustains his bodily existence in his passage through time from birth to death. So as long as you can realize that all your worldly possessions, no matter how big your house is and how many clothes in your closet, when you really look at it, really, it's just sustaining you through your brief passage through time from birth to death. See? And just be grateful for it. Be grateful for it. Be responsible for it. But don't base your life on it. Don't base as if somehow the more you have, the more you are. Because pretty soon you won't be here anymore. I won't either. And we're right now in via on this bodily journey, being led by God into our homeland in God, who's already at home in us, and we're seeking to find our way home to rest in this oneness, this way, which is the path. And he says, and over his breast pocket, a Bible, that is over his heart, is his Bible. And the heart is the revelation of infinite love to the pilgrim as being the beloved of infinite love. And this is the deathless beauty of himself. And again, we have over our heart the revelation that in Jesus is revealed that God's response to us in our dilemma, that is, in our confusion, in our wayward ways, that God's response to us in our dilemma is to become identified with us as precious in the midst of our dilemma this way. And I would give another insight into this too, which is the heart of the gospel. Because sometimes, I see this a lot in psychotherapy too, that let's say you're really burdened by something. And let's say you're burdened by a certain habit of your mind and heart that you know is compromising who you deep down really are and are called to be. You know it's something that is hurtful to you, bodily being, emotionally, or to another person. And like the thorn in the flesh, you can't quite get over it. You can't get past it. There's maybe a lot of shame around it this way. And so you're sharing this with a trustworthy person. And you get a sense in this person that you've entrusting her to, opening all this up to, that the person you're sharing this to, they acknowledge it's regrettable that you're caught in this. They're acknowledging, yes, it's really, it would be really wonderful if you could be more freed up from this, the thing. But the point is, the person you're sharing it with sees the reality of what bothers you, but sees right through it to the invincible preciousness of yourself as God sees you, which is infinitely more real than what it is that you're so ashamed about. This way. And little by little, what happens is you start to have faith in the person's faith in you. And little by little, that faith gets internalized and you find your way home. So with each other, that incarnates this way it is with God. That in the infinite tenderness of God revealed in Jesus, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. We see that God, it isn't just that God sees our weaknesses, which God does and understands infinitely more than we do, but God sees through the weaknesses into the invincible preciousness of ourselves as the beloved. And God sees that we're trying to find our way to have faith in that. How can we join God in knowing who God knows us to be as the beloved, as a broken, infinitely precious person, which is the path, again, which is the tonal quality of this whole work and of all these mystics, really, this way. Second paragraph. On the 24th Sunday after Pentecost, I went to church to say my prayers there during the liturgy. The first epistle of St. Paul to the Thessalonians was being read. And among other words, I heard these: pray without ceasing. It was this text, more than any other, which forced itself upon my mind. And I began to think how it was possible to pray without ceasing, since a man has to concern himself with other things also in order to make a living. I looked at my Bible, and with my own eyes I read the words which I had heard, that we ought always, at all times, in all places, to pray with uplifted hands. I thought and thought, but knew not what to make of it. I'd like to reflect on this way. He's in the midst of living his Christian life, and it's the 24th Sunday after Pentecost. And what is Pentecost? It's in the Acts of the Apostles in the Scriptures. That a long time ago, in a far-off place, a small group of people were quickened by God. Talk about tongues of fire, which is the birth of the church. And since we celebrate it in liturgy, we bear witness that we're participating in the Pentecost event. So it's the 24th Sunday after Pentecost in liturgical time. 24th, and this is going to be his unexpected Pentecost, sitting in church, but it's going to come with it as an unexpected quickening. And here's what I think is at the heart of this thing for all of us, really. You know, if we ask ourselves, insofar as we're drawn to these teachings of ever deeper union with God beyond what thought can comprehend and feelings can endure, all of that. We look back to the beginnings of how our faith was formed. For many of us, it was in childhood from our parents, not always. And it grew and deepened, and it is what it is. But from time to time, what can happen in the midst of our devotional sincerity is that our heart is quickened in an unexpected way and being accessed by God with a certain unexpected intimacy. Or these awakenings can happen. Sometimes they start happening when we're very young, sometimes. Sometimes they're very powerful, intense experiences. Sometimes they set our life off in a whole new direction. And what happens is the new direction we're setting in, we don't realize it at first. Like it's the ferment. But what it starts with, it comes in all the fundamental arenas of life, really. And intimacy with another person in the midst of nature, with children, with death, with solitude, with silence, with service to the community and the ordinariness of our days. It comes as it comes, it's given to whom it givens. But there's like a quickening or an interior illumination inside that you can't explain. And sometimes what happens, and this is the case of the Pilgrim, it comes to us really as a question that perplexes us. We're perplexed, and we're perplexed about something, G.K. Chesterton saying, we're bored to death with a story heard over and over that we never really listened to. This goes even deeper. This is a story, and he's heard this because he's heard this text many times at liturgy. It isn't just, this is the first time he listened to it, but somehow the active presence of God actively awakened him to it this way as an inner event, like a ferment, a little kind of taste of something deep within. And also notice something else about this quickening. This is very subtle. He doesn't he doesn't understand what's happening to him. And he wouldn't even know how to even start to put words to it. And a lot of times, the great turnings in our life to the deeper place, they take place with such an unimposing simplicity. We don't pause long enough to get into the paradoxical stature of the subtlety of what's happening. That which is essential never imposes itself. That which is unessential is constantly imposing itself. But because we're so caught up in what's constantly imposing itself, we don't catch the subtle touch of this thing for a while. Like it stirs with us, but it starts stirring in him as a desire to understand. How can I understand? And here's another theme, I think, that's at the heart of this book and in all these mystics. See, this is a deeper way to understand what it means to understand. For us in our ego, we understand by comprehending it. But here, our understanding is a radically deeper kind of understanding and finding yourself in the midst of you can't comprehend it because it's incomprehensible. You can't figure it out because it's unfigure-outable. You're suddenly in the intimacy, the unfigure-outable that has accessed your heart, and you find yourself in this place this way. I thought and thought, but knew not what to make of it. What ought I to do, I thought. And here's the next big insight, that it's asking something out of us. It's asking that. There must be a way for me to find my way to this inner clarity that I'm looking for. But if I'm going to find it, I just can't keep sitting here. I have to somehow lean into it, let it set in motion a certain way for me to pursue it as a seeker. And he says, I thought, where shall I find someone to explain it to me? That's what he's saying. Now, here's the thing about explaining. A person whose heart's been awakened by the unexplainable can tell when the person they're with is just explaining things. And because they're just explaining things, they're not saying what you're looking for. And where can I find someone to explain it to me? I will go to the churches where famous preachers are to be heard. Perhaps there I shall hear something which will throw light on it for me. I did so. I heard a number of very fine sermons on prayer, what prayer is, how much we need it, and what its fruits are. But no one said how one could succeed in prayer. I heard a sermon on spiritual prayer, on unceasing prayer, but how it was to be done, no one pointed out. Thus, listening to sermons failed to give me what I wanted, and having had my fill of them without gaining understanding, I gave up going to hear public sermons. And so it becomes a dropout. And it becomes a dropout not out of indifference to Christ, but he comes as a dropout, like Thomas Merton saying that a lot of Catholics are losing their faith and they're losing it in church because the church isn't teaching this. The church isn't teaching that God's infinitely in love with us, is already upon us, is unfolding in our hearts and bearing witness to this. And so he's kind of losing the familiarity of his religious surroundings here to the urgency of a question he doesn't understand this way, which is the solitude of the pilgrim. And I think solitude in this sense is we're less and less able to explain to anybody, including ourselves, what's happening to us. But through the inner imperative of our heart, we're being asked to be faithful to this. It's like a longing we don't understand for a mystery, a unitive mystery we don't understand, but we know it's real because we tasted it, because it's stirred within our hearts. Our own heart is bearing witness to this unfolding grace within us that we don't have our bearings in what this is. I gave up going to hear the public sermons, and I settled on another plan. And this is the unrelenting resiliency of the human spirit, not to be deterred by the fact that what you're looking for isn't given right away. Sometimes it takes quite a while. And you become seasoned in the searching. The fidelity to the search is the search is changing you this way, maturing you in it. By God's help, to look for some experienced and skilled person who would give me in conversation that teaching about unceasing prayer, which drew me unceasingly. In other words, his new insight is, I think what I need to find is someone who's ripe with these matters. I want to see someone who's already been overtaken by and lives in this habitual state. And when I'm with this person, it's not that I want to listen to a lecture, but it'll be a conversation. And really, this is contemplative spiritual direction. See, I'll sit with this well-seasoned person, and in a conversation, a dialogue back and forth, in the exchange back and forth, I can be led into this realization by finding my way to this person. For a long time, I wandered through many places. I read my Bible always, and everywhere I asked whether there was not in the neighborhood a spiritual teacher. So he's knocking on doors. Excuse me, do you have a mystically awakened spiritual director in your neighborhood? You can see how that would go over. Try it this way. But he wants to do what's ever possible to do. But I do think in more where there was still a spiritually luminous culture, it would have made more sense to do that this way. One day, I was told that in a certain village, a gentleman had long been living and seeking the salvation of his soul. He had a chapel in his house. He never left his estate, and he spent his time in prayer and reading devotional books. Hearing this, I ran rather than walked to the village named. I got there and found him. What do you want of me? He asked this way. I want to say something else, too. You know, I think in our society, our understanding of faith is so action-oriented. You might say, here's a person who never leaves his estate, reads devotional books. See? And we could say he's not out there changing the world. And by the way, that could be true. It could be true. There are people who, in the name of spirituality, shut themselves up and they have their own little devotional practices. But also, this is seeing a kind of a mysterious kind of fidelity to God, and our fidelity to God is touching the world in ways we don't understand. This is the intuition in cloistered monasticism, that our effectiveness in the world isn't dependent upon the ways that we're physically present to and help others. It is important that we're physically and help others, but what really matters is we follow our vocation. And this is this interior vocation of being led by God into ever deeper union with God, which touches the world. And by the way, this pilgrim is on this path to God. By sharing this story with us, he's touching us. So we are being touched centuries later, years later, we are being touched in the interiority of ourselves this way. See, what do you want of me, ask? Pilgrim says, I have heard that you are a devout and clever person. I think clever here means wise or insightful. In God's name, please explain to me the meaning of the apostles' words, pray without ceasing. How is it possible to pray without ceasing? I want to know so much that I cannot understand it at all. So not only does he not know the answer to the question, now he can't even understand the question. See? Even the question now, it isn't just that he doesn't understand what it is he's supposed to understand, but he doesn't even understand what the question is about how to understand. So it's getting more and more unraveled from finding what he's looking for in anything that he could explain this way. I cannot understand it at all. He was silent for a while and looked at me closely and said, ceaseless interior prayer is a continual yearning of the human spirit toward God. To succeed in this consoling exercise, we must pray more often to God to teach us to pray without ceasing. Pray more and pray more fervently. It is prayer itself which will reveal to you how it is to be achieved unceasingly. But it will take some time. I'd like to reflect on this. Ask him this question. I don't understand. He was silent for a while and looked at me. What was that? What's that about? I think it's this. If he just answers out of cleverness, it'll be his ego talking. See? He can quote a book, he can do this. So he's silent in the pause that allows God to speak through him, in pausing to be interiorly receptive to God so God might use him to achieve God's purposes in the world, which is say something helpful to this pilgrim this way. And there's something about that inner pausing to wait for the deep words to come. Because sometimes we start talking before we know what we're saying. And it's sometimes in the depth of the pause is where it starts to engender this clarity. So when you do say something, because of the depth that it's coming from, it reaches the place that it's meant to go this way. And then he says, ceaseless prayer is a continual yearning of the human spirit towards God. And here's another shift that happens. See, at first, we have to start somewhere. And he was taking it literally to pray without ceasing. How is that? How can I pray without ceasing? I have to go to work. I have the chores to do. And so he says the prayer without ceasing does not mean literal. It's a metaphorical language. What's unceasing is the desire, is the prayer. The desire for the unceasing embodies the unceasing. And your deepening desire to be ever more unceasingly grounded in the desire for God is be a faint echo of God's ceaseless desire for you. God is ceaselessly desiring you. And God arcs over and places within your heart a desire for God this way. And it's true, we don't have the constancy of God. It's like a flame that flickers in the wind. But in the sincerity of the desire to be ever more constant in the desire, it becomes paradoxically ceaseless. Like say if you love a community of people, it isn't as if 24 hours a day you're just constantly, you're living your life. But there's an underlying sensitivity to the preciousness of these people. And so there's a certain underlying sensitivity to what is somehow woven through the details of the day, regardless of what the detail might be we're in. It itself is a configuration of this underlying habitual stance that kind of permeates everything that we do. It is prayer that will teach you. In other words, here's another way I think to do this. Let's say someone wants to learn to be a poet. How do they learn to be a poet? By sitting down with a blank piece of paper and writing poetry. You have to be willing not to be good at it to start. You have to start somewhere, and you must be willing not to give up this way. So in order to write poetry, in order to sing, in order to be an artist, in order to teach, you learn it by doing it, and doing it by you're not claiming anything, except you're just sincerely seeking to learn to do it, and you learn to do it. And really, what you're trying to learn to do is teaching you as you commit yourself to doing it, is actively transforming you in the activity. And that's what this prayer is like. So saying this, he brought food to me. Oh, he said, but it will take some time. It's already taken some time. It's going to take more. So how long is it going to take? See, it's not your business how long it takes. So saying this, he had food brought to me, gave me money for my journey, and let me go. Along the path, I think we can look back at people along the way. They played their role in how we found our way to where we are now with this. Maybe it was a little piece, like a piece of the puzzle. And it's almost like you can connect the dots. And some of the people I think that played a role were people that at the time, they played a role in a hurtful way. But we learned something from the hurt. See, that everything has lessons woven into it. And so this is this person kind of in passing on the way he momentarily plays his role in this person's life. Again, I said, I thought and thought, and I read and read. I dwelt over again upon what this man had said to me, but I could not get to the bottom of it. Yet so greatly did I wish to understand that I could not sleep at night. And what is the bottom? Remember, if you were listening to the series, what we did on Eckhart on the ground. The ground for Eckhart isn't the ground you can walk on. The ground is abyss-like. It's bottomless this way. And so I can't get to the bottom of it, meaning I can't find my way to the bottomless abyss, see, of the ceaseless prayer that incarnates and embodies God's presence in my life. And he can tell he's not there yet. But he wants it so badly he can't sleep at night. And I don't think necessarily we're walking around with chronic insomnia because we can't, clock's ticking, I'm not a mystic yet. It's not like that at all. But even at night in your sleep, there's ways that it's kind of never far away. A kind of an unconsummated longing that you're strangely grateful for, because it's like a quiet light in your heart that before the awakening you didn't even know it existed. And you're in media res, you're in the midst of this unfolding this way. I walked at least 125 miles and then came to a large town, a provincial capital, where I saw a monastery. And at the inn where I stopped, I heard it said that the abbot was a man of great kindness, devout and hospitable. I went to see him. He met me in a very friendly manner, asked me to sit down and offered me refreshment. I do not need refreshment, Holy Father, I said, but I beg you to give me some spiritual teaching. How can I save my soul? What? Save your soul? Well, live according to the commandments. Say your prayers and you'll be saved, he says. There's a saying in the Desert Fathers, too, one of the stories, is one of the monks comes to the abbot, the head of the community of Christian hermits, and says, how can I save my soul? And he said, keep the rule and love the brethren. And he says, I do that. And said, then the teacher stood up and stretched out his fingers, and his fingers became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said, then why not become all fire? That's what the pilgrim's looking for. Why not become all fire? See, but so the abbot, this abbot, who's the abbot of the monastery, he's not gifted with that. He is gifted with his kindness. He's gifted with his humility. And there's another important thing here, too, I think here, is that this whole tradition is not a tradition of spiritual attainment. It's a tradition of holiness. You know, remember in Teresa of Avila, she's talking about these mystical graces. She calls them special favors. She says there are people who don't have any of these special favors, namely this oneness, and they're holier than people who do. So the desire for this is a charism within the community of an eschatological knowledge, of celestial knowledge that shines out through us. But it's our calling. That some people are called to bear witness. And I think everyone's called to it to varying degrees, some more than others, I think, this way. Save your soul. But I hear it said, and notice he doesn't accept the abbot's answer. He's in a play. But I hear it said that we should pray without ceasing. And I don't know what unceasing prayer means. I cannot even understand what unceasing prayer means. I beg you for. So not only, see, again, it isn't just the question's not answerable. The answer isn't available, but the question itself becomes more and more unexplainable this way. And what he's really doing, he's being strangely liberated from imagining that anything he's even capable of finding will ever be what he's looking for. That what he's looking for is something he's never able to find. But it unexpectedly finds him and already is finding him. See, in the perplexity of his heart that's guiding him on this journey like this. I beg you, Father, to explain it to me. I don't know how to explain it further, dear brother, but stop a moment. I have a little book, and it is explained there. And so he starts introducing him to the lineage of text. And notice that's what we're doing in Turning to the Mystics podcast. We're turning to text. And it just so happens the text that he gives him, we're being told about it in a story that is itself a text. See, this way. So that's how it works, I guess. And he says, the words of the apostle, pray without ceasing, should be understood as a creative prayer of understanding. And I'd like to reflect on that just a minute. See, it isn't that I understand now what I didn't understand before, but rather there's been a creative transformation of my understanding of what it means to understand this way. And really it's that metamorphosis of subjectivity, the metamorphosis of the understanding that is the growth itself that's leading him toward this prayer this way. He gave me the explanation. I spent the night at his house, and in the morning, thanking him for his kindly hospitality, I went on my way, whereto I did not know myself. Now he doesn't even know where he's going. Not only does he not understand the answer, he doesn't understand the question, and now he doesn't even know where he's going. He's in great shape, really. My failure to understand made me sad. But by way of comforting myself, I read my Bible. In this way, I followed the main road for 5 days. And I would like to say this. It makes him sad, but it's a sweet sadness. It's a sadness that he's grateful for. Because the intimacy of what he's looking for is somehow hidden in the sadness. This way. It's like a gentle sadness. It's the difference between depression and melancholy. Melancholy is a kind of a quiet sadness that's somber and has depth in it this way, like this, like this. And so I followed the main road for 5 days, sad, reading the Bible, going along. At last, toward evening, I was overtaken by an old man who looked like a cleric of some sort. In answer to my question, he told me that he was a monk belonging to a monastery about 6 miles off the main road. He asked me to go there with him. We take in pilgrims, said he, and give them rest and food with devout persons in the guest house. I did not feel like going. So in reply, I said that my peace of mind in no way depended upon my finding a resting place, but upon finding spiritual teaching. See, at last, toward evening, and at last, because here, the person he's been looking for all along, he's looking at him. Right there, just shows up. And what's interesting, this monk says, why don't you come? It's just 6 miles off the road. You've been traveling for all your years anyway. Just 6 miles. Notice it's off the main road. It's like there's off the main road. And here's what's interesting. He says, no, I'll pass. I don't go. And, it's like that sometimes. I think, when we finally found what we're looking for, we don't recognize it. because we were projecting onto it. St. John of the Cross has this lovely image. He said, imagine your chest is made of glass and a light is shining out from your heart. So if your heart is filled with fear, everyone you see is someone to be afraid of. If your heart is filled with anger, everyone you see is someone to be angry at. And so here, what if your heart is filled with longing, but your longing is ribboned with your expectations of what you're longing for? And when you're finally looking what you're really longing for, it doesn't match your expectations. And so there's another one of these transitional graces in our life. And notice also something, and we're going to end here on this point. He's now going to be led by this teacher. See, what kind of see, what are you looking for? What do you want? See? And this is where we're going to pick up next time also. St. Benedict says in his rule, he says, when someone comes to the gate of the monastery to be admitted to the community, don't let the person in, but keep him waiting outside for several days. And one of the senior monks is to go out and talk to the person every day. Like, what are you looking for? And the senior monk is listening for something, like a call note this way. And so this monk is going to be listening for something. And he's already picking up edges of it when he says, I don't need refreshment. See, I'm looking for something. And so the next section that we'll be looking then is the teaching. We'll be looking at the teaching on the practice of this prayer, this transformative Jesus prayer, the prayer of the heart. This way. So with that then, we'll end with a sit. So I invite you to sit straight and fold your hands and bow. And we'll slowly say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Mary, Mother of Contemplatives, pray for us. The Pilgrim, in our story, pray for us. The author of The Cloud of Unknowing, pray for us. Till next time, blessings.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Turning to the Mystics, a podcast created by the Center for Action and Contemplation. We're planning to do episodes that answer your questions. So if you have a question, please email us at podcasts@cac.org or send us a voicemail. All of this information can be found in the show notes. We'll see you again soon.
Do you feel called to walk a more contemplative path? The Center for Action and Contemplation is an educational nonprofit supporting the journey of inner transformation. Our programs and resources will help grow your consciousness, deepen your prayer practice, and strengthen your compassionate engagement with the world. Learn more about our resources, such as publications, podcasts, email series, and events at www.cac.org.